Okay, so this is now part 2 of our series in Data Structures and Algorithms Introduction. So we will be covering here the working environment, which is composed of the JavaScript development environment, the coding guidelines, and the JavaScript basics. So first off, we will be discussing web browser dev tools. So we have here an example of a web browser dev tool. So if once you open a site or a web app, and if you wanted to check the web browser dev tool, you can simply right click and select the inspect element. So once you have already started the inspect element, you can now go over the web browser dev tools. So moving on to the next slide, we have here the most commonly used tool in our web browser. By the way, we will be using Google Chrome as our standard web browser for all of our activities. So you can go and check your web browser DevTools console by going to the more tools and then selecting the DevTools, or just simply right click in the middle of our browser, anywhere in our browser, then select the inspect element. Okay, so here we have the editor that we will be using in the entire semester or the entire class, which is VS Code. So we will be using VS Code as our main uh, dev editor tool in our class. So another tool that we will be using, where we will be uploading our activities. So this is GitHub, so you need to create your own GitHub account. Once you have created your GitHub account, you will be creating also your repositories for your specific lab activities or activities that you will be uploading in our GitHub repo or repository. So we will be following these guidelines in uh, our journey with data structures and algorithms. So the first to be considered is utilizing camel case or underscore for variable names. So we have here an example. Variable first name is equals to John. So it utilizes the camel case. The second line of code, last underscore name is equals to Doe. So this utilizes the underscore method. So there are just take note, you will be utilizing two uh, standards in naming your variables: the camel case and the underscore. Another is space around operators. So you always have to take note that you need to consider spaces when you input your statements or your operators in JavaScript, and always fill in space after a comma. We have here an example: let x space equals space y space plus space z, then a semicolon. So always take note of that. Okay, so next, we need also to consider code indentation. So always use two spaces for indentation of the code blocks. So we have here an example of a function, and the name of the function is 2 Celsius with a parameter of Fahrenheit, having an open bracket, curly bracket. So As you can notice, we have two spaces before the return keyword. So that's the one that I'm mentioning here, that always use two spaces for indentation of code blocks. Another rule is statement rules. So for the general statement rule, uh, for simple statements, always end a simple statement with a semicolon, because this is a rule of a thumb in JavaScript. If you forget the semicolon, your line of code might be considered as an error. Okay, so you can notice here the semicolon at the end of the statement: const cars, Volvo, Saab, and Fiat. So we have here a semicolon at the end. We also have another example: const person, first name, last name, age, eye color. You may notice at the last part of the statement, we have again a semicolon. So another rule is to consider semicolons for our functions, for our loops, and for our conditions. So just always remember to fit in a semicolon in your statements. So next, alright. So this is the coding file structure of a typical working environment with a file structure using, of course, JavaScript. So your JavaScript will be inside the script.js, and of course you will still be using index.html or HTML to make your, or to access your JavaScript functions or JavaScript's source codes. So we have here a folder named DSA-2A- the name of the developer and what type of activity, and then we have here an HTML and again a script.js file. So dito papasok yung yung scripts ninyo or yung code ninyo sa JavaScript sa my script.js. And then lastly, you will be learning uh, topics relative to how to use comments, declaration, the difference between a variable and a constant, the operators in JavaScript, strings in JavaScript, and the type conversion. Ayan. So for our next topic, we will go over the code along using JavaScript.